Defund the police. In June of 2020, this politically charged three-word phrase became the controversial rallying cry for a growing movement in the United States. In the wake of the murder of George Floyd, a 46-year-old African-American Minneapolis resident killed during arrest after a white officer knelt on Floyd's neck for nearly 8 minutes, millions of protesters took to the streets in not only Minneapolis, but soon nearly every major city around the country. Floyd's death was the latest in a seemingly unending string of cases involving excessive police violence and unwarranted lethal force against black citizens. And in a country already on edge, due not only to a raging pandemic, but also a precarious, harsh political divide, amplified by the law and order heavy rhetoric of the current presidential administration, this was a tipping point. As the protests grew, the Defund the Police slogan soon sparked numerous social media posts, and could now be seen adorning flags and handmade signs and heard chanted in the streets all across the U.S. Critics of the movement mocked the notion, reductively and inaccurately claiming its supporters were all calling for total abolishment of all law enforcement, leaving the country a chaotic wasteland. Supporters of the idea, however, were quick to point out the notion of defunding the police was, in fact, a more complex, nuanced, and multi-pronged idea that has been heavily researched, written about, and advocated for in many circles for years, and was simply now gaining steam as a recommended course of action in addressing worrisome issues of police brutality, lack of police accountability, and systemic racism rampant in the American law enforcement culture. Many on the side of defund the police pointed to several suggested outcomes for the movement, usually focusing on significant reduction of police funding, allowing for more investment in social work and mental health programs, and delegating certain police responsibilities to other organizations with more relevant training. The issue of excessive police funding, in particular, spoke to another matter that had been gradually becoming a controversial element of American law enforcement: the increasing apparent militarization of the police. As concerned citizens saw even small-town police departments armed with body armor and tank-like assault vehicles, and with constant reminders of the difficulty involved in pursuing justice when it is the police themselves that are the unlawful perpetrators, it wasn't hard to see why many were fearful we were already living in what could easily be considered a police state. Nor is it hard to fathom why we might have such an inherent fear of such a system. After all, fictional stories of oppressive police states have long been a fixture of popular fiction, particularly enjoying much favor in the realm of satirical science fiction, with beloved novels like George Orwell's 1984 and Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, and classic films like John Carpenter's Escape from New York and Terry Gilliam's Brazil, all depicting terrifying future societies where everyday citizens are kept in check by tyrannical government forces. One of the most significant and enduring sci-fi satires depicting an American police state, one that defund the police advocates could perhaps point to as a whimsical but not entirely implausible warning of the dangers of unchecked police power, is, in fact, not an American tale at all, but rather a long-running British comic strip series about a future America devastated by nuclear war, where the traditional government systems have been usurped and replaced by a new fascistic form of law enforcement, police and judges rolled into one singular oppressive force. This comic, created in the 70s, would go on to run consistently ever since, and earn legions of fans and critical acclaim for its clever, witty, and thought-provoking satire. So it only makes sense then that when it first came to movie screens in the mid-90s, it would do so in the form of a giant Sylvester Stallone summer blockbuster from Disney? The year is 1995, and Walt Disney Studios is ready to adapt a popular, cult favorite comic character into their next big franchise, with Judge Dredd. 9, yes, the sound of another failed franchise takeoff means we have once again here for Failure to Franchise, the podcast devoted to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I am the law.
I knew you'd say that.
Good. I'm glad. This is why we're perfect. We're like peanut butter and jelly. You know, we just complement each other so well.
The question is which.
Sorry?
There are two characters who do like a big dramatic law delivery here. Which one are you kind of pretending to be?
I wanted to kind of blend it. So yeah.
Well, that makes sense. What, for story reasons we'll get into later.
Ooh, nice transition.
Yeah. So today we are talking about 1995's Judge Dredd, going back to the 90s.
Yeah, directed by Danny Cannon, written by William Wisher and Steven D'Souza. Budget $85 million. Domestically, it made $34.7 million. Worldwide, only $113.5 million. So not good in the slightest.
No, not a hit. So this is one where, all right, I guess I don't have anything more to say, actually. It didn't have any sequels because it bombed. Yeah. So next episode, I guess we could cover it a little bit more. But yeah, definitely, one of the... I don't know, I wouldn't actually even say this one is that infamous. I want to say it's kind of just more forgotten about somewhat. In fact, I don't know that it would be talked about even that much at all, if not for another later movie that we'll get to eventually. But yeah, I think it's just kind of a movie that kind of came and went, which is strange because it is an adaptation of a very popular franchise. So do you want me to talk about that a little bit here, since I know you're a little less familiar?
Yeah, well, I mean, you say it's a popular franchise, but I mean, I really didn't know anything about this for the longest time.
Well, and the interesting thing is when you talk about this being a popular franchise, it's a matter of like, where are you talking about that popularity?
Right.
Because it's clearly not as popular in North America as it is over in the UK. So we are talking about the comic book character, Judge Dredd. Yeah. So we actually thought this was kind of interesting going into this film, in that this is a comic book that I actually have. I'm by no means a Dredd-head, as I believe the fans are called, but I've read quite a bit of it, so I have like a fair enough familiarity with it. And then you haven't read it at all, and you don't know really much about the character. And there was talk leading in this episode about should I send you some reading recommendations or anything? And we decided to actually say, no, forget it. You can actually be the novice here, and then you can talk about the movie just as a film, and whereas I can talk about it as an adaptation.
I also just didn't want to do any more homework, obviously.
Yes. So. Well, yeah, your laziness really trumped it all. But
amazing laziness over here.
Mm-hmm. But Judge Dredd, so a very popular comic book in the UK, and actually I shouldn't to even clarify that. Judge Dredd is comes from a comic book magazine series over there called 2000 AD. So 2000 AD is a monthly magazine with multiple short comic stories in them. But basically, the idea is that each story will kind of play out over a few issues, and then different issues start new storylines. Very similar to the magazine Heavy Metal, that was also made into an animated film in the 80s. That's kind of more known here in America.
All right.
You're not in America, but I am. Yep.
Thankfully, I'm not in America right now.
So this magazine has run for a long time, and in fact, the character of Judge Dredd and his stories started running in the magazine in 1977. So we are talking about a character that has now existed for over 40 years. And even on top of that... well, I'll get to that in a second. I should say he was created by the writer John Wagner, working with the 2000 AD editor Pat Mills and the artist Carlos Ezquerra, who is the primary Judge Dredd artist. Obviously hasn't drawn it all, but if you tend to look up Judge Dredd image searches or stuff, or most of the famous stories, you'll see a lot of it coming from Carlos Ezquerra, who designed the look and is really like kind of the architect of that. John Wagner, people might know the name. He's more known to American audiences as the writer of the comic book A History of Violence, which was of course later adapted into the fantastic David Cronenberg movie.
Yep.
He also had a run on Detective Comics back in the 80s, I believe it was, maybe 90s. I can't remember. But he's come over and crossed the pond sometimes and done some American work as well. But I think if you just look at him as an overall creator, what will ultimately go on his tombstone will be Judge Dredd, creator and really overseer. Because here's the other interesting thing about Judge Dredd, or one of the other interesting things, is unlike a lot of American comic books and American superheroes and just that kind of comic book mythology here. As I said, the Judge Dredd comic stories start in 1977. They are all like anything in 2000 AD. The assumption at the time is they'll do a few stories and that'll be it. Wagner has talked about how he really didn't think the storyline would go beyond maybe 12 to 15 or so installments.
Okay.
And in fact, they even create some initial story concepts that he later finds like really difficult to have to work with because it goes longer. Because right away, people love it. It becomes a huge kind of hit. It becomes kind of the main thing 2000 AD is known for. And essentially it gets to a point where now people primarily think of 2000 AD as the Judge Dredd magazine. They later give Judge Dredd his own magazine called the Judge Dredd Magazine, so there's basically 2 monthly titles that both feature Judge Dredd in the UK. At various points, American companies do get the rights to it. DC, for a time in the 90s, publishes 2 short-lived Judge Dredd titles, starting their own kind of Judge Dredd continuity, which I read was okay. Right. At the moment, IDW, an American comic book company, has the rights to do their own kind of Judge Dredd universe, which they're doing over here in a various monthly titles. The point I wanted to make, though, was once it kind of caught on and kept going, a very interesting element, and this is what's unlike most American stories, is that it still has the same continuity today. It is never
really?
It has never rebooted. It has been sequential ever since the start. Characters have aged in real time.
Oh, cool.
Judge Dredd, as you know, so he's like depicted as being much older now in the comics than he was when they first started. There's a character named Beanie, who's like kind of a fan favorite character, who is introduced to us in a famous storyline called America as a young girl. And we have since watched as this young girl grows up, joins the cadets, becomes a judge. So you've actually watched this character grow in real time, and multiple things have happened to the city that this takes place in over the time. And so it's kind of interesting because I think for new readers, it can be an intimidating series to start.
Yeah,
to
I was
jump
just about
into.
to say that like it just feels like I would. I love the idea of that, but it makes me worried to even jump in ever.
So what they've been pretty good with is that so when I say that it's like the continuity is the same, it's kind of like soap operas, or what I assume soap operas to be. And something like General Hospital has been running for decades, right?
Totally.
But that doesn't mean you need to have seen every episode. And Doctor Who would be another example of this, right? If you want to get into Doctor Who now, I usually just tell people, well, start whenever a new Doctor comes on. You don't really have to go all the way back to the beginning. In fact, it's actually impossible with Doctor Who because there's early episodes that are missing, that you can't even find. So if you were going to be a completionist, it's just impossible. But you can always start at a different era. With Judge Dredd, yes, the storyline has progressed throughout time, and there are major events that are referenced and stuff. But it's still, it's not like they're not on chapter like 5,000 of a book.
Right.
There are multiple. There are like sub stories within, and that's where you can always jump in. And there's kind of like these big event stories that get collected into trades. That's mostly what I've read. I haven't read as much of like the little individual stories that are just the kind of fun ones put in the magazines. But there will be like these mega stories that run across multiple issues and then eventually get collected. And those kind of become like famous moments in the Judge Dredd history. And I mean, just from doing some research myself, every time I kind of hop back into the book, obviously there's multiple websites, Judge Dredd Wikipedia and stuff like that you can go reference to catch you up on the history of any character that might walk in or something. Because obviously in the UK, it has this very devoted fan base, people who have been reading it since 77 and know all this stuff and still chronicle it. But it also has a new generation of readers. So yeah, and I guess I'll talk a little bit about what it even is. So for our listeners who might not know, the concept of Judge Dredd is it is a look at, it takes place in North America, a futuristic North America, where most of the U.S. has been decimated by nuclear war. And over time, pretty much the entire East Coast, stretching from Maine down to Florida, I think I'm trying to think of like the map in my head, but it's definitely like a wide swath. Like all these states kind of joined together and became something called Mega City 1. So there are various mega cities that America is made up of. And in between all those megacities, where the majority of what would be the red on an electoral map, essentially looking at is called the wastelands, the cursed earth. That's where there's no megacities. It's just it's basically Mad Max out there. Various mutants running around from the nuclear wars. Just lawless bandits and things. And you don't want to be out there. You want to live in the megacities. That said, the megacities have their own issues in that you're talking about the entire eastern seaboard being turned into one giant city, and it's super overpopulated. Most of the citizens live in what are called these mega blocks, which mega blocks are actually tall skyscrapers that essentially it's like a skyscraper, but like every level, there's the levels that are just devoted to people's living spaces. Then there are other levels that are devoted to where people get their food, where people do their shopping. They've even sold the idea before that some people like could maybe go their whole lives without ever even leaving that building. You could live your whole life in there because kind of everything you need is in these mega blocks.
Right.
And the government system of Mega City 1, and this is stuff, again, I'm not going to get into the whole history because it's just too much. This is stuff that's evolved over time. But the basic general idea of Judge Dredd, the hook of the book, is that you are following the men and women of the Hall of Justice, the judges. The judges are the government in Mega City 1. They are judge, jury, and executioner. It is a system run by the chief judge, and then there are various other kinds of judges, including the street judges, which are the ones who patrol Mega City 1. Right. And that is our main character, Judge Joseph Dredd, who is kind of one of the most infamous kind of hard-line judges. Mm-hmm. And the book is essentially meant to be a very satirical look at a police state, essentially, right? It's a very kind of political satire. Judge Dredd is this super harsh judge, and the judge system in general is kind of obviously a satire of, I'm trying to think of how to say this. I guess police state is just the right terms, right?
Sure. That works.
Yeah, I mean, any kind of violation, the judges swoop in, charge you on the spot, and it's very, very harsh. The judges have the authority to just issue an instantaneous death penalty and kill you there, right down the street. That's actually not used as often as you'd think, but more likely they do sentence people to terms, to these sentences in these these little cubes that people have to go live in. And like jaywalking will get you, like a year or two in these little like jail cells. And if you, end up getting one arrest and kind of one violation, that becomes part of your permanent record. And then any arrest after that, your, punishment is just, that much worse. And Judge Dredd is kind of the main character, known for being like, there's kind of no reasoning with him. Yeah, he's very harsh. He loves the law. That's what he's all about. And some of the other things about him we'll talk about as the episode goes on, because it's about it factors into the adaptation of this. Definitely. But it's one of those kind of odd things where he's the main character, but he's a character that there's not a lot of character growth. I want to be careful with how I say that, because obviously over 4 decades of storytelling, there has been a little bit, but he's kind of supposed to be this somewhat unknowable character in terms of other than what he lives to do. He lives to dispense justice. Yeah, we've never seen his face in the comics. He's infamous for always having his helmet on, or in the moments where he has the helmet off. They've actually done things like put a black censored bar over his face.
Oh, really?
Or sometimes they'll actually do the thing where they'll draw like a sequence where if his helmet gets knocked off, it'll kind of go into Austin Powers territory, where suddenly there's always something blocking his face from the reader. Yeah. So that's like a little cool, like a little hook of him too. And that's it. It's very satirical. It's very. A lot of people have said that they believe it kind of was a big influence on RoboCop. Oh, and I would say it's very reminiscent of that kind of sense of humor, right? That satirical look at corruption in law enforcement, and sometimes it's not even corruption, because sometimes they are the heroes, but right, just like power unchecked, essentially.
So you're saying in the far future, police officers can issue death sentences on the spot.
Overly militarized police force. The far future.
The far
clearly
far
nothing
future.
Like what we're living through today.
After a nuclear war, that's what's going to happen. Okay, well, I hope that never happens. Anyway. It's been a weird week, folks. Yeah. So, yeah, no, that's you know what I know about the character? You gave me a real good history lesson there, but I honestly, the only thing I know is that he does not take that helmet off. And that's it. I'm like, okay, like I mean, I got it from the movie, obviously, what was going on, but yeah,
well, it's interesting
that's
too,
the only
because
knowledge I have.
I think what's super interesting is the fact that it is a UK comic. And I think sometimes people who don't know much about Judge Dredd but know it's UK comic, I think they assume that Mega City 1 is in the UK. And I'm not sure people often get that. No, this is actually the eastern, the east coast of the US. And it is very much, like I said, a satirical look at like U.S. government. I mean, obviously, we're dealing with themes that can apply anywhere, and it is a matter of So Wagner has often talked about how it really is that kind of thing where he considers himself a very liberal person. So then, as satire, he creates, the most conservative hero possible. Sure. And that makes Judge Dredd like an interesting character. It also makes him a tricky character to adapt, as we'll talk about. It makes him, it's very much like the Punisher, right? It's interesting when characters like that are presented as heroes, right? Because there are clearly times the character's in the wrong, and that's why you kind of have to you have to sell it as satire, because sometimes it's just the jokes are coming from the fact that your hero is just, sentencing a little grandma to 2 years in jail for, not having her dog on a leash or something. One last thing I will mention about Judge Dredd too is that if you look at so Wagner, again, this is impressive. He's really been the guy kind of overseeing it since '77. He hasn't written every story, but he's written a lot of them, and then he kind of, still is the guy kind of, overseeing it all essentially. Mm-hmm. But when you look at other writers who have had goes at it and have worked in 2000 AD, a lot of kind of really well known names in the comic book field, Alan Moore, Grant Morrison, Garth Ennis, they've written kind of iconic Judge Dredd stories as well, and then people like even like Neil Gaiman got his start in 2000 AD. So it's been a springboard for a lot of great British and European comic talent as well.
That's sweet. I didn't even know it was a UK origin either. So that was kind of shocking to see. I mean, in a way, it kind of makes sense that over there they're looking over to the States or something over all these years and getting their satire from there. So it kind of makes sense to throw it in the US. So.
Well, and I mean, and when you think of '77, I mean, it's like again they're setting it in the U.S., but I mean, at that time too, there was definitely a youth. I mean, that's the era of punk rock, right? And it's a very much kind of Margaret Thatcher and kind of a revolt from the youth culture against the monarchy and the royal family. Mm-hmm. So I mean, they're not just they're setting it in America, but they're kind of satirizing that kind of conservatism anywhere.
Sure. No, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. I just don't know what 77 looks like, right? Because I'm like so young.
Yeah. I was 32, so. So yeah, that's the Judge Dredd comic, and like I said, it essentially in the States, it kind of only really had a little bit of a cult following here. Mm-hmm. Definitely, like I said, it was, the comics would come over here a little bit. I know as when I got into comics as a kid, there were, you could get issues of 2000 AD here, but yeah, it was certainly never like a Batman or a Spider-Man here.
Right.
But it was known enough to, get some attention and be in the play for a movie adaptation, obviously. And I guess we should say, so this is the section of the podcast where we usually talk about like, why did the movie happen? Mm-hmm. I'm gonna give you 2 words as to why this movie probably happened when it did. You ready? Batman. In the wake of 89, the 89 Batman, that really was the beginning of a new slew of comic book films, right? Right. And so the early to mid 90s are kind of full of these, these initial attempts to get a comic book movie boom going. Ones that are kind of a more infamous and more looked back on with, curiosity than what we would consider the more, successful modern day superhero boom. So you get films, everyone suddenly was trying to replicate that formula of Batman. And a lot of these studios, it was definitely a different time. And so studios were kind of buying up whatever characters they could get to try and, step their next thing. So you would get some other DC characters like Steel getting his own film, and things like that. But you're also getting people going back to older pulp characters like the Phantom, like the Rocketeer, like the Shadow. And then you see with Judge Dredd, thinking, and like a film like Tank Girl was around this time as well, buying up even like lesser known properties, kind of more cult comic books and saying, maybe that can be the next big blockbuster for us. Do you want to talk a little bit about Sylvester Stallone at this point in time?
Yeah. At this point, Sylvester Stallone is kind of top of his game. He had the 1-2 hit of Cliffhanger and Demolition Man.
Yeah, which is actually kind of like a comeback 1-2 hit for him.
Yes.
So this is like because his career goes in peaks and valleys, right?
Big time. Yeah. And so like he was coming off quite a bit of good stuff. And he kind of wanted to get into the superhero craze because at this point, he's got Rocky, he's got Rambo, he's got all these characters, so he's looking for another character like that he can continuously do and drop in every once in a while, and another Judge Dredd could pop up and be in the vein of Rambo and Rocky. So he wants to be a part of the superhero craze, and he sees this. I guess, did he look for the property or did it like kind of pass his desk? Kind of one of those
I think it
moments?
Came to him because there was definitely talk about how, they were first looking at Schwarzenegger for it.
Yes.
And this was the thing, right? Throughout the entire late 80s and early 90s, these two guys were always in contention for everything against each other.
Definitely.
There are even like infamous stories about Schwarzenegger, like kind of playing pranks on Stallone to kind of steal roles from him.
Right. But it was
a friendly competition for sure, but definitely a competition between the two of them for roles.
for sure. And then, I mean, at this time too, they I guess the producer Bo Marks, right? His name Bo, yeah, Bo Marks. He was looking for a writing duo to go for it. So, in the vein of Stallone and that type of thing, they looked to Steven D'Souza. So, obviously, a big beloved action film writer. Die Hard, Commando, 48 Hours. So that seems like a nice blend of that action genre. Obviously, Stallone's in there, and now we're going to jump into this, the quote-unquote superhero comic book realm. So it kind of feels like a surefire hit, I would say, with that formula.
Well, we should also mention the director, though.
Oh, yes, the director. I guess, okay, yeah. What I will say, so I mentioned Bo Marks. He kind of wanted to, he was putting this movie together. He wanted to get a bunch of young blood, fresh ideas, young crew. He coined it measured gambles. So he wanted just to inject some youth into this. So we hired a 26-year-old Danny Cannon. So he
only had one film to his credit so far.
Yes, one movie. It was called what is American something or
The Young Americans.
Young Americans.
Like a well received, but certainly not by any means giant hit. Starring like Harvey Keitel, and Viggo Mortensen, early Viggo Mortensen. Yeah. But yeah, not a famous film or anything by any means. Probably just got some decent reviews, and so it's that kind of like I said, let's snap that guy up. Yeah,
and it's kind of, I mean, nowadays I think because we just know so much of what goes on with studios and who they're hiring and this and that, that feels like a really common thing. The Marvel crew does this. The Star Wars crew does it. It's, you make a little indie hit. Oh, the Jurassic World people did that. You do a little indie hit and it's pretty good. And all of a sudden, boom, let's get this guy. Let's probably pay him next to nothing and we can probably boss him around. But that was their mentality here, was just kind of, it's funny when we mentioned Danny Cannon being so young. Supposedly the whole crew was really young too. Like they really went all out to just kind of coordinate, kind of almost in contrast with Stallone. Like Stallone's a mega fucking movie star at this point. So it's just an interesting balance. We'll talk about if that worked or not. But yeah, that's kind of what it was. Danny Cannon came in. He actually. So I don't know if he had a pitch, because I think they went to him first, but then he did come out saying like how much he loves the character. He's a guy that followed the comic books. He read he reads them almost religiously. He was a big fan of them, and he seemingly got it. He understood what they were going for. I have a quote here, him saying that he's not into campiness of comic books. I read Dredd as a kid, and though I wasn't a great comic book reader, I kept coming back to Dredd because it was so anti-superhero. It intrigued me because it was far more political. It took itself more seriously than any other comic book. So
because we should say he is British, and that's the thing is like and he's born in 1968. Dredd starts in 1977. Like I said, just runs consistently. You find, and there are other people in Hollywood I've seen talk about this character and project, which we'll get to over time. But you definitely find people of that kind of generation, and it's like this is a character they always grew up with. And I think like in the UK, it's like I said, it's just a much more well known character primarily also because like I said, it's running in these two magazines, right? It's not something that you're necessarily only finding in comic book shops. I'm guessing this is a magazine that's just on the newsstands there. And there was even because one of the initial Judge Dredd books I got as a kid was a collection of Judge Dredd daily strips, right? So like for us, like the funny papers, they would even have. Judge Dredd for a time had a daily strip that was running in one of the newspapers in London, I believe.
So yeah, basically, Danny Cannon seems like he's well equipped to at least handle the source material. But reminder, we bring up that he's young and impressionable for reasons.
Yeah, yeah, and being hired to direct a movie with a giant star with a lot of clout.
Giant star, big budget too, like we mentioned. That's a lot of money for first time big movie directors. Think of it that way, right? So
a lot of pressure. This is it's not the kind of job you turn down, but in a lot of ways, certainly probably something of a nightmare scenario in terms of lost sleep on a new first time or second time director, I should say, right? So yeah, you got a giant budget, an iconic character with, at least in parts of the world, a very devoted fan base. It's going to be looking very carefully. This is like it's a two-pronged issue, right? On one side of the Atlantic, you have a very devoted fan base who is going to be, very kind of analytical about how you're handling the character.
Right.
And on the other side of the Atlantic, you have an audience that does not really know the character. And you are now you have the pressure of trying to introduce this character to them, which is a very tough thing to toggle those two extremes. But I mean, the rest of it seems like the pieces were maybe in place, so it's, like you said, Stallone's coming off a couple of hits. You got a young, energetic director, giant budget. What could go wrong?
And we'll time to discuss, I guess.
When there is crime in society, there is no justice.
As a city, we continue to grow.
73 citizen riots.
Come and get us! Throw down your weapons and prepare to be judged! Judge this! Court's adjourned.
Dredd.
You're a legend. You were my finest student.
Dredd, you're under arrest.
What's the charge?
Murder.
The evidence has been falsified!
Guilty as charged.
I am not the law! I am the law!
Chaos.
The sentence shall be life imprisonment.
I'm the chaos. Dredd?
Let me crush him, Paul!
Excuse me? We're not together.
It's not for this council to play God.
Who says politics is boring? We're going to war. You got a lot in common.
I'll be the judge of that.
Yesterday, I watched a futuristic movie where a new form of extreme policing is put in place to rid the world of crime. Max von Sydow plays one of the higher-ups within this organization and acts as a mentor for our mega Hollywood star main character, whose first name starts with a J. Through video evidence that is played back for all to see, our protagonist is set up for a murder that he did not commit. He spends the rest of the film on the run in an attempt to clear his name and solve the murder mystery. But enough about Minority Report. Let's talk about Judge Dredd.
Yeah, people don't give Minority Report enough credit for being a backdoor Judge Dredd reboot
Absolutely, yeah.
or subtle remake.
Yeah.
We're you know what? We're on to you, Spielberg. We're coming for you.
I know. I'm breaking my DVD of Minority Report right now and tossing out what a hack fraud. Anyway, I don't know if you made that connection watching it at all.
No, I was kind of watching it more thinking about how indicative it was of where the country is heading in general.
Okay, fair enough. But yeah, as soon as I saw Max von Sydow, I was like, holy shit, all right, it's the exact same movie. Okay.
Well, because I wasn't born in like 2012 like you.
Right.
When I think of Max von Sydow, I tend to think more of The Exorcist than Minority Report, but that's okay.
I mean, he looks the same in that movie that he did in this movie and that movie. Wait, hold on. In that movie, they had makeup on him, right?
So this is one of the amazing things. Like, yeah, he's actually much younger in The Exorcist than he plays.
Amazing.
And so sometimes people think they're like growing up, they're like, oh, he's this really old actor.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you said, the amazing thing is that like the makeup job they did just ended up being exactly what he looked like as he got older.
Amazing.
Like it's like perfect. You know,
The greatest old age makeup of all time.
Mm-hmm. Kudos,
anyway,
Dick Smith.
Yeah. But anyway, no, we'll get back into Judge Dredd right now. So we want to set the stage a little bit here for the history of the world building here. So we actually have a special guest. So I guess take it away.
In the third millennium, the world changed. Climate, nations, all were in upheaval.
Whoa. Wait, hold on. Trev, let's do this right. Okay?
Yeah, if you're gonna get like that guest, we might as well go all in.
Yeah, okay. Let's get back into it.
the Earth transformed into a poisonous, scorched desert known as the Cursed Earth. Millions of people crowded into a few megacities where roving bands of street savages created violence the justice system could not control. Law as we know it collapsed. From the decay rose a new order, a society ruled by a new elite force, a force with the power to dispense both justice and punishment. They were the police, jury, and executioner all in one. They were the judges.
In a dystopian future, a police force called judges rule with instant judiciary powers up to and including death sentences. Joseph Dredd, the most famous judge in all of Mega City 1, is convicted of a crime he did not commit and must prove his innocence and face his murderous counterpart.
Thank you. Thank you for that synopsis, and thank you to, of course, Darth Vader.
Yes.
For giving us our further background.
Yeah,
so that, of course, comes from the opening, the film, which I guess if you need to get, so this is 95, directly post Lion King. Mm-hmm. There's no question why they got who they got to do the opener there.
Yeah, big time.
Did it make you think? Now, this is your first time watch for you. Did you listen to that narration and think James Earl Jones would pop up in a role later in the film, or were you like kind of keen already to be like, oh, okay, he's just doing the narration?
That's a good point. I think maybe if I watched it when back in the day, I would have thought he was going to pop up for sure. But I think just because now, I think I just know what movies James Earl Jones is in, mm-hmm. So I think that. But it is kind of a strange choice. Mind you, I will say that the company that Disney owns this movie, don't they? Or Disney? I thought.
It's distributed by Buena Vista and made by Hollywood Pictures. So yes, technically those are now those are Disney companies. Yes.
So there you go. You got Mufasa in there, and makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of this movie?
Okay, let me get into this. Yeah. So I had not seen this movie in a very long time. In fact, I don't know that I'd seen it in its entirety since the theater. This is, interestingly enough, a movie that I have a very particular memory of seeing in the theater, even though I was only 14 at the time. But I don't know about you. Would you, when you went on family vacations, would you guys go see movies while on family vacation?
I distinctly remember us seeing Tropic Thunder on a family vacation once.
Yeah, so like my dad was a big movie buff, and that's like a big part of why I got into movies. Mm-hmm. And so part of like our family vacations is wherever we went, we would still like take one afternoon and go see a movie. And it was really kind of thing like, well, let's go see what the theater is like in this city or something,
Yeah.
And the reason I specifically remember this is because I have a memory of getting hyped for this movie when I was 14 and actually going out and getting some of the Judge Dredd comics because I knew the movie was coming. And I actually remember going on this. So this was a trip. This was June of '95. This was a trip to Disney World, and I remember taking with me on the trip that book I was just talking about earlier, the collection of Judge Dredd strips.
Okay.
So while I was, while we were flying down there, and then while I'm in the hotel or driving around, I'm reading these strips, and then I'm getting excited because I'm, my parents have already said, yeah, that's the movie we'll go see because it's going to open up while we're down here, so we'll take an afternoon and go see it. And I saw it, and it's like when you're 14, I don't think I like hated it. But I wasn't super taken with it. And of course, the reputation over the years has been very, very negative. Mm-hmm. And I think it really grew in my mind as just this kind of bad film because I wasn't as taken with it as you would think you would be even at that young age.
Okay.
So a couple nights ago, I sit down to rewatch it. And I'll say this. It was not as bad as I remembered it to be or as I thought it would be. Okay. But that is not the same thing as saying it's good.
No.
So there are some positives here. I think the negatives probably outweigh the positives, but I think it's an interesting film and maybe more interesting than I even gave it credit for initially. So that's what but I'll talk more about it as we go into it. What was your, this is a first time view for you, correct?
Yes. I always want a little bit of conflict on this podcast, but it seems like we start to agree on more and more. I know I just made that complicated because I'm in the middle, but that's the thing. Yeah.
It's like if you said you really liked it, I don't know that I would really argue with you that much because I think a big part of that would be, well, yeah, you're not attached to the character. You know what I mean? Like if you're coming to it completely clear of the comic book and the character as he exists. And I could see someone watching this and be like, well, that's just a fun movie. And then if you hated it, I wouldn't put up much of a fight either, because I'd be like, yeah, it's pretty bad, you know?
Yeah, like I mean, part of me leans to the more it is a fun time. Like I don't know, I did not hate it. I did think it was. I did like kind of stop paying attention for a while. You know what I mean? I think it does get pretty boring.
It's a movie that starts pretty well. That's the
yes.
thing. It's a front-loaded movie.
100%. So maybe that's what I'm coming at. So like I thought the ending, or sorry, I thought the beginning was pretty good. Pretty good. I was actually having quite a good time.
I was too, and that's what I mean. Like I was kind of in the initial like 20 to 30 minutes or so, I was watching it and being like, maybe I was wrong about this film. And then the further you get in, you're like, no, I wasn't.
Yeah, exactly. And let me tell you a little things that I liked in the beginning, right? So it opens up first with an Alan Silvestri score. And as we've said a few times on our podcast, and one of our listeners actually coined for us, we should call ourselves score whores. So
score whores, I'm down for it. When we get the t-shirts made.
Oh, they're on order, my friend. But we are definitely score whores. And I love a Silvestri score. It is classically Hollywood. It gives me all the feels of just classic Hollywood. And, you know, you see Stallone at that time and at that place. It gives you that Planet Hollywood vibe. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, it just feels like a kid again, and I feel like I'm watching a Hollywood production. The same way how, again, the world building is really cool in the beginning. The special effects are all on screen. And I was shocked that it was in 1995, because the special effects were actually quite good in the beginning. Let me put a caveat there. In the beginning, they look great. The shots of Mega City 1 are fucking cool. It looks great. And I will say, I'm gonna say, I reminisced of one of our previous episodes called Super Mario Brothers, and it looks almost identical, minus not looking disgusting. But it does have a very similar vibe, that Blade Runner vibe, right? But in that mid '90s Blade Runner vibe, you know, like everything looks like a set.
Oh, that's exactly what I was just about to say. Yeah, it's that, because like when you watch Blade Runner, it feels like an actual city. Sure. When you watch Super Mario Brothers or Judge Dredd, and I'm not even saying this as like a negative, because like you, I think there's like a this kind of charm to it. To me, it looks like a theme park version of a dystopian city. Like you can tell there's like really ceilings above them or something, you know. It just doesn't look quite real. There's the natural light's not there. Everything looks like a soundstage, but it's still pretty cool.
And I've had that conversation with one of my best friends. We've talked about this actually recently, about how Spielberg is like that. Like Indiana Jones movies look like they're on set. Like I mean, and his even just the like the Temple of Doom, that's a set. We're on an amusement park ride. We're going through the Universal Studios tour. Like, so there's something about that just really appeals to me. So I'm a big fan of that. Yeah. And it was funny because I thought it took, I mean, I don't want to get into more of, well, you know what, I'll just jump. The Super Mario Brothers movie went dark when it should have been more goofy. Now this movie goes goofy when it should have been a little bit more dark. Maybe. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's interesting because I think, again, you know, we talk about the beginning being pretty good, and I'll say, like, especially the first, like, I actually have a particular time I'll actually give you in a second, but like the first 15 minutes or so, and especially like the first 10 minutes, are the most like Judge Dredd stuff that has maybe ever been put to screen. And I know it's gonna be a controversial statement eventually, but the opening of this film is pretty badass. So we actually get, because this is a film that you were talking earlier about how Danny Cannon grew up on the comics and like loved the character. This is a film that brings in a lot of elements from the comics. A lot of you know, these characters all come from the comics, and then just this tiny little things that are, I wouldn't call them Easter eggs, but they're more like the kind of things you pepper in to prove to the audience that you know the world. Sure. And so at the beginning we see what is called a block war, which is when two of these mega blocks will just go to war with each other. And essentially that means you have one giant skyscraper kind of feuding with another giant skyscraper that is across the street. So they're kind of firing at each other, and sometimes the block war will pour out into the streets. And that's where we kind of pick up. Well, I mean, really, we first pick up with this character, Herman Ferguson, otherwise known as Fergie. Not played by Fergie from the Black Eyed Peas, but rather played by Rob Schneider. So he is a hacker that's been released from prison. And he is being sent to, you know, when you get released from prison, you have nowhere to live, because in this kind of society, once you've been in jail, all your kind of, wherever your previous domicile was taken away from you and everything. And so you're kind of sent to public housing. Mm-hmm. And he is sent to live in this block right as it is involved in a block war. So kind of walks in and they instantly basically they recruit him into the block war. And then the judges show up. And
can I say one thing though?
Yeah, of course.
I got a little worried at this point. And you want to know why?
Because it's Rob Schneider?
Actually, no. That's funny. But actually a different actor.
James Remar?
James Remar.
You shouldn't. I don't like. Okay, I know you're saying you're worried because of Mortal Kombat Annihilation, but James Remar.
And I just rewatched Blade Trinity. Why, you ask? I have no idea. But James Remar, when he shows up in a movie, I get very, very worried.
No, come on, James Remar is legit. Have you seen The Warriors?
You know what? I don't think I've seen The Warriors.
Okay.
Yeah. I used to work at Walmart though when I sold the PS2 game of the Warriors, I believe, but that's all I know of the Warriors.
James Remar was also supposed to be Hicks in Aliens.
Thank God that didn't happen.
A little bit of trivia for you. I think he would have been fine. He wouldn't have been as iconic as Paxton, of course.
Anyway, okay, get back to it. The judges show up.
The judges show up, and of course, and they play it right, where you first get your kind of side character judges who show up and kind of try to insert themselves. And then Judge Dredd rolls onto the scene, and his introduction is actually pretty fun, right? And it's very Judge Dredd.
And can I say, I love the look of him. It looks great.
Well, okay, and we should mention here so that we don't forget to say it later.
Yes, yes.
This is a movie where all 90 million of the budget is on screen for sure. It's production designed fantastically. In general, the costumes are great in this, and then in particular, the judge costumes. I believe these are the only costumes where this is the case, but Stallone, who I guess wanted to make sure this film, looked pretty cool and everything, he actually recruited Gianni Versace to design the judge costumes. Now, to be fair, I've seen some people kind of take issue with it. Say, well, design it. All he kind of did was look at the comic book and say, do that. But still, he brings a very kind of cool, filmic look to it. They are slightly different than the comic book appearance.
Sure.
They're not as colorful. The comic book judge outfits are kind of a mix of blue and green, where these are just primarily all dark blue.
Yep.
But it's got the giant eagle shoulder pad. It's got the cod piece even.
And on Stallone looks fucking sweet with it. Stallone is super V. His upper torso is so super V that when those shoulder pads are on them, he just looks intimidating.
Yeah, and in these opening moments, he's playing the humor of Judge Dredd very well.
Yep.
It's in this early sequence, you were really selling the satire of this character. In particular, once we get through the whole block war sequence, the moment where he finds Fergie and is kind of super. So Fergie, who again, remember, does not want to be in this block war at all. The movie kind of insinuates that maybe he is a character that will try to go on the straight and narrow now, but to try and avoid this giant massive firefight he's found himself in, he hacks into a droid that basically rolls around the building. It's basically a food vendor droid, actually selling. If you hear the voiceover that it does earlier, it sells recycled food, which is a fun little joke.
Yeah, I like that.
Recycled food, good for the environment, okay for you. And so he hacks the droid and gets inside it, and Judge Dredd realizes that and kind of instantly sends him back to prison for hacking this robot. And this actually is a great character mode too, because it tells us everything we need to know about Dredd, because Fergie is making the point. He's like, I had to do this. I'm just trying to avoid, getting killed. And Dredd just doesn't care. It doesn't matter. Destruction of property. Sentences him to 5 more years in the cube.
Supposed to be watching out for him.
Don't blame yourself, Hershey. He made a mistake, not you.
Wouldn't it feel good to have an emotion once in a while, huh?
Emotions. There ought to be a law against them.
Eat recycled food. It's good for the environment and okay for you. Please make your selection. Insert your credit in the slot.
We have 5 seconds to surrender.
Dredd, it's just a servo droid.
The servo droid
Dredd?
is your friend.
5.
Please let your
4,
friend go by.
3.
You are in the way of the servo droid.
1.
Boy, am I glad to see you.
Mega City Code 7592. Willful sabotage of a public droid. That's 6 months, citizen. Let's see your unicard.
Come on, give me a break, Judge Dredd. Dredd? God.
Ferguson, Herman, hacker. Illegal tampering with city droids, computers, cash machines, taxi robots.
And you haven't even been out of jail for 24 hours. He's habitual, Hershey. Automatic 5-year sentence. How do you plead?
Not guilty?
I knew you'd say that.
5 years? No. I had no choice. They were killing each other in
You
there.
could have gone out the window.
40 floors? It would have been suicide.
Maybe, but it's legal.
So right away, like, oh, so that's the kind of character Dredd is. And even then you have Judge Hershey, played by Diane Lane, who's kind of telling Dredd, like, can't you take it easy on him? And he's like, nope. And so it's like we get a lot of good information. So yeah, first 15 minutes or so are great. Let me give you a time code where things start to fall apart.
Okay.
An infamous moment in Judge Dredd history. 16 minutes, 23 seconds into this film, Sylvester Stallone, as Judge Dredd, takes off his helmet. Mm-hmm. And it's all downhill from there, buddy. Not really, but it's a bad, like, I mean...
I'm pushing back on this.
Well, we of course have to talk about this because you know that this is a giant controversy about this film. Yeah.
And I'm gonna push back on this because it's like I wrote in my notes. I know you gave me the history lesson earlier about the context of the comic, and okay, I accept that. Mm-hmm. I accept that as the comic book, and that's fine. I'm not gonna shit on that whatsoever. I actually think that's an awesome, fun idea for the page. Okay, I mean. Can you blame having Stallone, one of the biggest movie stars on the planet, for them not to take that fucking helmet off of him to show him? And hold on, and contextually, it makes sense to take it off later. So, who gives a shit? If you really thought at that time, with the way movies were made and the amount of money that there's in there, and get this mega star, like. Nerds gotta fucking cool it sometimes, and like, it just seems that the helmet has seemed it seems sort of gimmicky. So when he takes it off, it's like whatever. I don't know. I just don't think it adds anything to his character or not for him taking it off. I really don't. I really don't.
Okay, so I'm going to push back on what you just said because I think it's kind of two arguments happening here because. Okay. I actually agree with you that yes, of course I understand that.
Excellent. Podcast over, everybody. Thanks for listening. at 2F2Fpod on Twitter. And
like us there, like us everywhere. No, I mean, yes, I'm not stupid. And of course, going into the film, we knew the helmet was coming off because we'd seen the trailers. It's not like that caught me by surprise in the theater. It was something like people were like stealing themselves for. And that's a reason people were already kind of apprehensive about the take on this material, right? And that's what I'll say to it is that yes, you're absolutely right. You don't cast Sylvester Stallone in a $90 million summer blockbuster and have him keep the helmet on. But then my pushback to that is that, hey, maybe that's not the right approach to a Judge Dredd movie in the first place. And I think that is borne out throughout the film where the helmet coming off, you're right. I actually tried to think about that as I watched this film where I said, well, what if the film was just better? Would that bother me as much? And I don't know. I can't honestly answer that. I don't know for sure. But I will say, the helmet coming off is the beginning of something where it's indicative of the ego, the star ego, and the star mentality that ultimately sinks this film. So that's why I think it's a problem. Not necessarily just because of the character element, but because that just means that if you can't commit to a very important and iconic part of the character because of the star that's involved and because of what has to be in a Hollywood film, then that means you're probably also going to fuck with other things, and they definitely do, and that's the problem with it. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's a good point. That is a good point. That it's like,
and I also think, like you said, it's like to a certain element of that. Then too, you made the point about how the helmet coming off later contextually makes sense. Then why not wait till that moment? Like why not play it? Like why not let him keep it on longer and then have it be? That's the strange thing is when he takes it off, it's just kind of a moment where he goes to talk to Judge Fargo, right? Who is Max von Sydow, who is the Chief Justice or the Chief Judge. Sorry, no, it is Chief Justice. Chief Justice Fargo, his mentor, summons him to his office to talk to him, and he says at ease, and Dredd takes off his helmet, and it's like you don't care, but you can just feel like the fandom be like ugh right there. But since that is such a part of his character, since this is a book that's been running since 1977 and we've never seen his face, why not have the helmet come off once he's found guilty later and have it be like, oh my God, like he just got found guilty of this crime he didn't commit and now they're taking his helmet off and that's the first time you see his face? Wouldn't that be way more powerful? The fact that they didn't even consider that just tells you like, they didn't think this through. It was more important to just get to Stallone's face. We got to have the moneymaker there on screen. Can you at least agree with that? Like, it's the wrong point in the film for it to come off.
Yeah, and no, I agree with that completely. It is the wrong time to come off, but like again, it was coming off. Like, does it make the film that much better if he takes it off at that moment? Does it? Or is it just more contextually a little bit more well thought out?
I mean, I have more to say about like the reason it comes off.
Sure.
Like you're talking about how
We'll
the story, why it comes off, because like even there I have issues. Although I do think it'd be funny if and it would feel more in the spirit maybe of how silly the comic book can be, is that what if he just kept wearing the helmet even while he's being sent, into prison? But
yeah, I don't know. Again, with the only thing that I know about this character, and people get so fucking angry about this helmet thing, I guess I've just never understood it, and I know I'm not part of the Dredd-heads, okay?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think it's always easier for people to be like that. You hear this consistently, right? Where people who don't care about a character will then be like, "Well, what about that change?" And then if it's something you were a fan of, you'd lose your mind a little bit more. Right?
True. Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm just so. I do feel like I'm better at just allowing things to be different. Like I'm okay with I mean, me and you fight about the Dark Knight Rises a lot. That's a different conversation, but I'm okay with him quitting, and he's kind of retired because this is Nolan's take. This is a different thing. It doesn't need to be the comic. It's different. It's his own story. These 3 movies. I know right now you're getting blood red mad, and I can see you from all the way from Canada.
You're misrepresenting my critique of that film. My critique is not that I don't mind that he says in the first film that he wants to only be Batman until he quits. I don't mind that. I've always said that the franchise sets up the thematic ending of the franchise should be him dying. And they whiff that.
And I agree with that, but also that's just it's a thing that, did you really think he was going to be killed? Is it way better?
Why not?
Obviously.
Like, why?
But because it's Batman, and that's okay.
It's Batman in the last film in a series that they've already told us is its own singular continuity.
I know, but they say that now until later on they fucking bring something back. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is just
but
Hollywood.
if you can have the guts to kill Iron Man, spoiler alert, you can also kill Batman.
23 movies later. Come on. Anyways.
You already had your dumb replacement Batman ready to go anyways. You're part of the movie.
Yeah, that was dumb.
Yep. So anyways,
sorry. A little bit of an aside.
But obviously that's not really where I think the movie like completely goes off the rails.
No, of course.
But I will say the movie never does really quite match the energy and the fun of those opening minutes.
Yes.
But it's still pretty okay for a while. There's later stuff where it really starts to slip.
You mentioned Diane Lane. I love her. We have to talk about her just because she made her entrance in early on in the movie. She's great. Every time she shows up in anything, she's great. Also, absolutely beautiful, and she has not aged since that movie. She looks the same, and in that movie especially, just oh boy, Versace did a good job of making these bodysuits. Good for her. Yeah,
and she's like tasked with a kind of difficult role here because so there's 2, in Judge Dredd lore, there's these 2 particular supporting characters that he's often teamed up with, and one is Judge Barbara Hershey, which is who Diane Lane plays, and then there's Judge Anderson, who just thematically and everything on the page is the more interesting one because she's psychic. She's part of the side judges who have psychic abilities, and Judge Hershey is more just kind of another judge. If you read the books consistently or read, a lot of the stories through the years, you see like this kind of big character growth with her where, she starts as this very idealistic judge, then over time kind of starts to become more hardened, eventually does become the Chief Justice herself. So Judge Hershey in the comics is like this very kind of compelling character. But here, there's not much to her, and they kind of just saddle her with being, love interest isn't the right word, but just the person who always believes in Dredd and is like ready to fight for him. So she's not given a lot on the page, but you're right that Diane Lane is just kind of naturally likable.
Yeah.
So she makes a character out of very little, I'd say here.
And also, I just the chemistry between the 2 are really good. We will come back to that at the end though, which I was not a fan of. But there is like something of a chemistry that works between them, and I think Stallone in general is just really naturally charismatic. I just like seeing that guy, regardless of what he's doing in his performances. In this one too, I I actually like his performance in this movie. I think I saw a lot of, in doing the research for now, a lot of people shitting on him. And I mean, he's got that stoic quality as a lifelong experience of what he's doing. And he's so by the book that, like, again, what did you fucking expect? But whatever. But he's got that natural look. He's a good-looking guy. They've given him blue contact lenses. We're a little distracting just because I think he's just he's a megastar, but he's just like a really good-looking, charismatic guy. So of course you throw Diane Lane in there, and then they both are just kind of oozing, like Hollywood. I don't know how to, you know what I'm trying to say? Like they're just the casting in this movie is actually quite good, minus one person. Maybe Rob Schneider. Actually, Rob Schneider is the second person as well. But
well, let's talk about the Schneider of it all.
Sure, the Schneider of it all. I like that. Okay.
Well, I guess we should say you did say what the story. Let's just again give the basics of the story.
Okay.
So where we pick up the story is at a time where there's the kind of media is starting to push back on the judges a little bit more. Sure. There's a lot of talk about how this system is starting to seem corrupt and everything. And there we actually follow this one particular reporter who we see is like very critical of Dredd, and he's kind of working on this report about what the problems are with the system. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly he is murdered by Dredd on video. Mm-hmm. Now we are the audience. We know that that's actually not Dredd. The question is, well, how did that happen then? And Dredd is then kind of framed for this. And Dredd is found guilty, and Diane Lane defends him, or Judge Hershey defends him in court.
Yep.
And it seems like it's going well at first until they reveal that the gun that was used to kill Hammond is the judge's weapons are DNA coded to them. This is something that does come from the comics. Yeah. Anybody who tries to use a judge's gun, if it's not the judge, it will blow up in their hand and kind of basically blow their arm off. They say, like, well, no, if we've checked the bullets and judge's gun was used, it was his DNA, so clearly it was him. So he is sent to prison. And as he's sent to prison, he's put on the same vessel with Fergie, who, as we remember, he just sentenced to 5 years for destruction of property with the droid. So they end up on this vessel together, and then the vessel ends up getting hit by a missile over the cursed Earth, crashes in the wasteland, and now we have these. They're the only two that kind of survive the crash. Mm-hmm. And now for the rest of the film, they are a team because, a team of coincidence, right? Where they don't like each other, but, Fergie realizes his best chance of surviving out here in the wasteland is to stick with Dredd. They encounter a family of cannibals, who we'll talk about a little later, I'm sure, who also come from the comics and everything. But as Dredd is kind of putting together the pieces of this mystery, Fergie is like the de facto sidekick. Right. And it's very much so we said this is coming off of Demolition Man, which, let me just quickly say, is actually my favorite Stallone movie. I love Demolition Man. And
I will say I just, for the first time, watched Demolition Man this year, and I loved it. It is phenomenal.
It's great.
It is awesome.
I actually think in a lot of ways it's clearly the more successful version of what this film is trying to be.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's maybe in my head too, like even in my vague idea that there's a Judge Dredd movie with Stallone and there was Demolition Man. It's almost like in my adolescent brain kind of merged the two. Mm-hmm. But
But so, Rob Schneider appears in that more briefly, obviously, just a couple little scenes. But I'm sure people found him funny. He's still kind of a known name at this time. And this was very much, well, I was going to say this is the era of this. It's not that this ever went away, but this kind of tendency in Hollywood to, give actors like a comedic sidekick or give action stars a comedic sidekick. I know that Stallone apparently first asked Joe Pesci if he would play Fergie, and Joe Pesci turned it down. I just think of that in my head and how much better that would be.
He would, but really, and he answered the phone. He's like, "What? You think I'm funny? What? You think I'm funny?" And then he hung up on him.
Yes, his classic bit from My Cousin Vinny. I couldn't think of a more obscure Joe Pesci movie.
No, that worked. That was good.
But anyways, so Rob Schneider gets the call and comes in. So this is a long ramble just to talk about the idea of giving Dredd a comedic sidekick. I will say this time, I didn't hate it as I thought I remembered hating it, or that I was sure I would just based on the reputation of the film. I think a lot of the worst moments in this film are kind of moments of forced humor with Fergie.
Yes.
But I don't watch this and really blame any of that on Rob Schneider. I actually think Rob Schneider is doing pretty well in this film for what he's being asked to do. It's a decent comedic sidekick performance. He's never egregiously annoying. Would you agree with that? I mean, he never there's moments where you kind of groan, you're like, oh, that didn't need to be there. but he never really ruins a moment in a giant way that sometimes happens with these kind of characters.
Yeah, no, he's good. He's used just enough, and he's doing well enough.
Yeah, they kind of try to push him as like the audience, identification character, right? Because he's always reacting to just how emotionless and rigid and strict Dredd is.
And I also want to say, I don't shit on Rob Schneider. I'm fine with him. It's around that time, he's good in SNL. He was good, and I think maybe I bring a lot of baggage when I see Rob Schneider. I bring in the 20 years of garbage Adam Sandler movies and just him being so terrible in everything that I think when I see him, I get this visceral reaction of just like, oh no. But he is in the film. He's fine. He's good. I don't want to say he's good, but he's fine.
No, he's not good. He's fine.
No, he's fine. But I think that's what I bring into it. I bring in the baggage of like a fucking Rob Schneider's in here. Like, is he gonna do it like a goofy voice, a goofy accent? Like, you know what I mean? I think that's my problem, I guess. So I can't really shit on the movie for doing that. But anyway, yeah, I'm a huge Rob Schneider stan, by the way. I got his posters on my wall right now. A Schneider. They call us Schneider shins.
Are you more of a deucer or an animal head?
Oh, I'm a deucer.
You're a deucer?
I'm a deucer. Love a good deuce.
Remember how the animals start? The female lead in that was just some girl from the first season of Survivor.
Was it?
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to Google.
Like
that.
Survivor was like such a big deal at that time that they were just like, that girl who was like one of the contestants on it. Like, let's put her in the film.
That's so funny because that kind of happened with Survivor season 2, the Outback one, right? You get the Elizabeth Hasselbeck of the world, and anyway. We're going on tangents this episode.
If I remember correctly, the one that's in the animal is the one that on the first season of Survivor like went off and had sex with one of the guys in the bushes.
Oh, was her name Jerry? Does that make sense?
No, I know Jerry was like the evil one, right?
Yeah, she was evil. Yeah. Okay.
No, this was Colleen.
Colleen. Oh, I don't remember. I remember Jerry. Jerry was good shit. I liked her.
Mm-hmm. That first season of Survivor is pretty legit.
Oh yeah, first and second season are fantastic.
Yeah, I remember
remember when the second one they almost died? Like they were like they had to like give them food, and it was like
there was also the guy in the second season who fell asleep and fell into the fire.
That was the second season, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yep.
Because the third one was what, Africa? That was the one, right?
I don't know. I honestly think I might have just stopped after the second season. Maybe I knew. Maybe I was like, yeah, it's not going to get any better than this.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good. Like I think it really peaked.
But I did then go back to like one of the later ones where it was like an all-star season because Richard Hatch came back.
Yes.
And then that was the amazing season where Richard Hatch, the shark bit him in the water, and he beat the shark to death against a rock. And I was like, see, you can't take it away from this guy, it's
fun little another aside in an aside, an Inception side, Incepticide. I recently I like certain reality TV. I'm not a big fan of it, but there's certain ones that I have a lot of guilty pleasures. One of them being Big Brother, and one being MTV's The Challenge. And I also listened to some recap podcasts about those, and they've been talking about how Survivor's so good right now in the last couple of years. So actually, the 37th season, me and a buddy, we watched together. Like we made sure to keep following along. I have to say, that show kicks ass. They have a well-oiled machine on that show. That 37th season was fantastic, and also Jeff Probst is an amazing host. So if anybody's wondering about like checking out Survivor again, throw on season 37. Just throw that one on. I just it was fucking good, man. I'm telling you. I didn't come back for 38 because for the exact reason you said you didn't go for Survivor 3. You're like it peaked.
Yep.
So, anyways, there we go.
Yep.
Get back to Judge Dredd. Where were we?
We were talking about how much you like Rob Schneider, but yeah, he's I think you just got finished saying he's one of your top 5 actors.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
But yeah, no, he's fine. He's like not like I think he has that kind of thing where because the movie is bad and because it's has this negative reputation stuff. And just he's Rob Schneider. Mm-hmm. I think people just kind of tend to put it on him, and he's an easy target. But I really do defy people to watch the movie and say, oh, he's the biggest problem with it. That's just not true.
And then we got another main character, the villain of the piece, not Tom Sizemore.
So you texted that to me the other day, and it was funny to me because I guess you're just since you are younger, as you like to point out, you weren't around for the glory days of Armand Assante, I suppose.
No, absolutely not.
But no, so Armand Assante is our villain here, and he's definitely cast for a very particular reason, which we'll get to in a second. But he plays Rico, who's the film's villain. So it turns out we see early in the film that Rico is someone who is serving time in prison, and we see him escape through the help of a crooked judge. Crooked judge helps him get out. He gets his own sidekick in the film, which he finds a decommissioned ABC warrior combat robot, and kind of resurrects it and brings it back. This is interesting. This, like I said earlier, this is a film that pulls in a lot of stuff from the comics. The ABC warriors, so which this robot in particular, the ones in the film, they never say his name in the film, but the character's name is Hammerstein. He does come from the ABC Warriors comics, which were a part of 2000 AD, but were a different continuity than Judge Dredd. So this is not actually from the Judge Dredd universe, but it's from the 2000 AD line of comics. There was eventually, I just found out in doing some research, there was like one storyline where they did merge the continuities, but they eventually like wrote that out of continuity. So it's just like kind of a strange thing where, I was just talking the other day about how I recently watched the new straight to VOD and straight to video film Happy Halloween Scooby-Doo. And for just some strange, because it's all Warner Brothers, but the Scarecrow, the Batman villain, the Scarecrow is in it. And I was like, oh, that's weird. And that's kind of the same as here. Just be like, well, this Hammerstein also comes from 2000 AD. Stick him in there. He's not in the same continuity, but whatever. He's cool looking, and he is pretty cool looking. It's great practical effect. He's like one of the cooler looking things in the movie. Pretty awesome.
When I saw this giant Rock'em Sock'em robot, I was like, I'm in. Again, another thing that I just really, really had a great time with, and like you just mentioned, the practical effect of it all. Man, I just miss it. I miss seeing stuff like that. And it's one of those. It's so obviously a puppet. that there's so much charm to it. I just love it. Goes back to what we were just saying about how it looks like a set. It looks like they're wearing costumes. There's something about that type of Hollywood filmmaking that I just love. And the Rock'em Sock'em robot was a big hit for me. And of course, I like my giant robots. So yeah, as soon as I saw that, I was like, man, I gotta watch Real Steel again. I like that movie too.
Well, hold on, because we might watch it for this show eventually.
Yeah, I hope so, honestly.
So Rico is released. He gets this robot, and we find out that he's instrumental in this plan to frame Dredd and basically start bringing this system down. And it is a conspiracy enacted in order to get Judge Fargo to relinquish his role as the chief justice, so that Judge Griffin, the crooked judge, can kind of take the place and kind of put his own, version of authority in.
Yeah.
Why though so Rico is the person who impersonated Dredd and shot this reporter? What about the DNA on the gun, you ask? Well, let me answer, dear listener. Spoilers for both this film and for a comic series that is now almost 35 or so years old. But it turns out Rico and Judge Dredd, or Joe Dredd, are both clones of Judge Fargo. Early on in the judge system, they tried to make like the perfect judge, and since Fargo has always been looked at as kind of the most incorruptible, perfect judge, they used his DNA. And that's why you mentioned Stallone having blue contacts. That's why both him and Armand Assante wear blue contacts in this, to kind of try and match Max von Sydow's blue eyes. And they are like accelerated clones of him, which Dredd does not know, and that's what he discovers through the film. And he knew Rico, like him and Rico were friends when they were both cadets. And we actually find out that the reason Dredd is the way he is because he found out Rico was, breaking the rules and, using his judge authorities in the wrong way. Right. So Dredd judged him and sent him to prison. And from that point on, Dredd kind of turned off his emotions, vowed to never have another friend, never to trust anyone in that same way. But now he finds out that he's been lied to his whole life, that the memories he has of a family when he was young were implanted into his head, and that he's just a clone, and that Rico is his clone brother.
Yeah.
So when I say that they cast Armand Assante for a reason, it's because obviously not an exact match, but once you see the two of them standing next to each other, Armando Assante does kind of have a little bit of a Stallone look, wouldn't you say? I think it actually kind of works in this film. I can like buy them as being, brothers to a sense. Now it's weirder when you get into the fact that they're both clones. That's kind of like, all right, now, but as brothers, yeah, good enough.
I mean,
he's obviously not as big as Stallone, but I mean,
nor do they have the same face.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's why I said, like, this is the issue, right? If you were just telling me they're brothers, that works. But That's what I'm saying. Where once you get into the clone thing, it gets a little iffier.
Yeah. Like, I can see, he definitely looks like maybe Frank Stallone. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's I mean, he's cast for that reason. And then also, I don't know, can we get into a little bit of, like, a tonal thing here? Like, he's, I mentioned I like Stallone's performance, and it's kind of stoic and this and that, and, he charismatic, and he does have a little bit of, I don't want to say, I mean, a little bit of humor, I guess, but it's more like that satirical type of humor. You know what I mean? Like it's very subtle. But then this guy, not Tom Sizemore, is so over the top that he feels like, I don't know, does he feel like he's in a different movie, or does everybody just feels like they're in all different movies? You know what I mean? I
mean, he feels like he's in a better movie. If you want a conflict, maybe here's where we're getting to it, because I will personally say I like Armando Assante in this more than I like Stallone.
Interesting.
I think I feel like Armando. This is something we say often about other performances on films, but I feel like Armando Assante kind of knows the movie he's in more than Stallone does. I think you're right. He's very hammy. He goes for it. Mm-hmm. But I find him kind of consistently entertaining, especially in those moments where he just goes super over the top. I think those are some of like the more memorable moments in the film. And I think I'm just in general, I'm always down for like a very psychotic villain in these kind of films. And I think he plays it well. I actually quite like him in this.
You could never control yourself. What makes you think you can control these things?
You're in control. You be head of the council. You choose. And you choose quickly, too.
I should have put you down myself. Personally.
I never understood that. Why did you judge me? Why did you judge me?
You killed innocent people.
The means to an end.
You started a massacre.
I caused the revolution.
You betrayed the law!
Law! I betrayed this! Your council's experiment, which failed!
Yeah, I hear you, and I guess it's just like the mismatch of everything, right? So like, kind of going back to a little bit of the production of this, Danny Cannon supposedly really knows the source material, right? Mm-hmm. Stallone gets a hold of it, and as we've said before, or as we alluded to, a conflict ensues.
Yep.
Danny Cannon wants to make a gritty, grounded, dark, violent as fuck version, and Stallone wants it to be fun and goofy and comical and just like kind of jokey and silly, because that's his view on the comic genre, right? Now, this movie originally shot, and it actually was submitted to the MPAA 4 separate occasions because it hit an NC-17 rating. It took
just for violence.
Just for violence. It took 4 times to get it down to an R rating, and then after that, Stallone still pushed to get it to PG-13.
Mm-hmm. Now, which he could just never quite pull off, but that's what he wanted.
He couldn't get it done. Man, the stories of these two fighting on the set seem legendary, and it does seem like even their animosity to each other has never really quite gone away. Here, I got a quote here that Danny Cannon had said, dealing with Stallone's attitude over everything. It's tough. In the comic book, he has green boots. Sly wanted green boots. Talking him out of that was weeks. And then he says, working with Stallone was like putting your head down and slamming the brick wall. They were two immovable objects working on the same project.
In fact, I know that Danny Cannon also infamously, I don't have the exact quote, but he has infamously said that working on this film, he vowed to never work with another big star again.
Yeah.
Yep.
And also there was I think this was my favorite one, that Stallone had a little bit of a comeback saying to him, he goes, I knew we were in for a long shoot when, for no explainable reason, Danny Cannon, who's rather diminutive, jumped down from his director's chair and he yelled to everyone within earshot, "Fear me!" Everyone should fear me. Then jump back up to his chair as if nothing happened. The British crew was taking bets on his life expectancy. So those three quotes, put all together, this film is destined for complete mishmash.
Mishmash. Yeah, that's interesting because, as I said, like the film starts pretty well, and at the beginning, it's actually kind of nailing the tone of the comic, and the satire's there. And then, as you said, as it goes on, you're right. This is clearly a film. This is one of those films that you just feel the push and pull of different authorial voices.
Yeah,
and it's weird because, like, ultimately, this is a film. So going completely dark and gritty with Judge Dredd is not the right answer either, because the Judge Dredd comics are funny. There's no doubt about it. But it's satire, right? The humor comes from just how strict Dredd is and like just the pure ridiculousness of the situations. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to work any harder to make it funny. It's just the situation alone is where the comedy comes from. And ultimately, this is a film that should have the tone of Starship Troopers.
Oh, totally.
Right?
Yes.
Like that tone would be perfect for this. And there are moments early on where it is that. Like I said, the Silvestri score kind of helps it at times, where it has that kind of traditional kind of militaristic kind of hurrah kind of theme. And you see the judges riding around. It's like, okay, we're getting there. And then Stallone sticks his comedy loving face in here, right? And it's so weird too. It's so strange that he wanted to turn this more comedic, because we mentioned earlier how Demolition Man and Cliffhanger were comeback films for him. We should say the reason he needed a comeback was because he was coming off of a string of failed comedies like Oscar and Stop or My Mom Will Shoot.
Yeah.
It was kind of like people were like, you are not a comedic star, which I actually like. I actually think Stallone does have good comedic timing. Very good comedic timing, actually. But yeah, I don't know if his view of like what makes a comedy film work is very strong.
Yeah.
And then once that starts taking over, it's no longer the satirical kind of comedy that's working. It's instead veering into bad, groaner one-liners. That's where the Schneider stuff that doesn't work starts coming into play.
Yeah.
And you're right. And then you're right. Just the tone becomes like a nightmare in the back half of this film. Because and like I said, you can still feel the moments that are supposed to be dark and probably were dark in the NC-17 version. But then you can see where like the cuts are, where suddenly it always backs away from that stuff. A great example being the moment where the ABC droid like murders one of the judges by like tearing his arms off.
Yeah.
And they just like kind of cut away from it very quickly. And you just see some blood fall down. You're like, oh well, I guarantee you that was way more brutal originally.
Definitely.
So I guess what we're saying is hashtag release the canon cut.
Let's get it trending, guys. Let's go at F2FPod.
Another problem with the back half of this, and I don't know how much this one bothered you, but and we're getting back into like casting here, is we're introduced to another supporting character, Dr. Hayden. Dr. Hayden, played by Joan Chen, who for me I will always think of Joan Chen as being from Twin Peaks. But she was definitely kind of a known commodity around this time. She comes in as Dr. Hayden, who is the doctor in charge of the cloning program. So what we find out is the plot that Judge Griffin has come up with is he will frame Dredd, and he knows that Fargo, who is Dredd's mentor, and is very because that's basically his son, right? He's very protective of Dredd, and so they kind of enact this plan to force Fargo to retire. And when judges retire, they go on something called the Long Walk, where they volunteer to head out into the wasteland and bring law to the lawless, as they put it. I like that idea, actually. It is in the comics. In the comics, it's actually, I believe it's a choice you can make. You don't have to do it. It's kind of interesting in this that they say that once a judge retires, it's just like that's like the requirement.
Right.
Which doesn't give judges much to look forward to, I guess. But to save Dredd from getting the death penalty, Fargo says, okay, well, I'll actually step down and I'll take the long walk. But the rule is that the custom is a retiring judge is always allowed one personal wish, and my wish is that you go easy on Dredd. You're lenient in his sentencing. And so that's why Dredd is sent to prison instead. Wow, why was I even bringing up that point? Oh, okay. So the reason Griffin is doing this is so that he can become the Chief Justice, and now he's going to resurrect the cloning program.
Right.
And basically make a version of the clones that'll be more super loyal to him and just basically give him complete control of the forces now. And he has picked Rico to lead this, breaks him out of prison because he wants Rico to now wreak havoc throughout Mega City 1, murder judges left and right, to essentially create this sense of lawlessness and anarchy, where everyone will then come to Griffin and say, whatever you want to do, we're giving you the go-ahead.
Yeah.
So, standard movie bad guy plot.
Yeah, totally.
When he resurrects the cloning program, we're introduced to Dr. Hayden, played by Joan Chen, who is just such a non-character that it's like incredibly frustrating.
Yeah,
and you realize at the end that the only reason she's even in here is so that they can have a cat fight with Hershey at the end.
Yeah,
like that's it. And it's just like, ugh, like, and it's just one of those things where not that she's ever like such a big part of the story that's like distracting, but it's distracting once you get to that point. You realize like, oh, that's the only reason she's in here, like using up this time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get a good actress and a known actress to do it. It's kind of like, well, what's the deal with this?
Yeah, I've honestly, I pretty much even forgot that she was in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like until you've just kind of reminded me.
Should we talk about the wasteland sequence really quickly?
Yeah, we can touch on that because I have some feelings on this cannibal group. So basically, like Trevor said, Dredd and Fergie are in this they're being shipped off to prison or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it gets blown up and they crash land and then they got to make their way back to Mega City 1. Well, they encounter these cannibals who actually did shoot down the plane. I don't know. I'm conflicted about this, and this might be a fight. So I looking at reviews and looking at what people like about this movie, so many people like this scene, and they say it's awesome and it's super fun, and I understand. And now I found out that they are characters in the actual books, so that's probably a lot to do with it. I don't know, man. I am getting so tired of the exact same type of mutant, cannibal, criminals, weird prosthetics in a post-apocalyptic movie. Like, I just feel like I've seen it so many times now that I just it was like nothing special to me. And I know that's going to sound so stupid, but I was watching it and I got nothing out of it. I really didn't. I was like, this is just, I've seen this a million times now, and I almost expected it. Like, oh, another Mad Max. We have the mutant character. Oh, they're cannibals, because of course they're cannibals. And I don't know. It's kind of a trope in this type of subgenre that I think I'm just done with it. I don't know. I don't know. Is that, you're probably in the opposite spectrum of what I'm saying right now.
Well, I have mixed feelings on this scene because I like these characters.
Okay.
It's also fun, like the father of the group. So they're the Angel Gang.
Yeah.
And like Pa is played by Scott Wilson, like beloved character actor Scott Wilson, and I'm always happy to see him. Mean Machine, who's the most memorable one. I think he looks awesome. So he's like, this like basically they've made him into a cyborg, and his whole thing is he's called Mean Machine because how angry he is controlled by a dial on his head. And It's like when you first see him, they've got it set to 1, and then whenever his dad reaches over and like turns the knob up, it like basically makes him like more angry and more strong, which is a fun idea, and that's why that character is probably so memorable in the comics and like a fan favorite character. But here's the thing: is like bringing them in for the scene. This I mentioned earlier, so they have the long walk, they have the ABC robots, they've got the block wars. This feels like a movie made by people who are like, I can't believe we're making a Judge Dredd movie. Let's make sure we get everything we can in from the comics. And I think what you're referring to is that they feel out of place in this film because you can tell there is like a whole backstory to them. They could be interesting, and they're given 10 minutes of screen time.
Yeah.
And Mean Machine in particular, who's such a fan favorite character, and I think the film treats him well. He looks exactly like it does in the comics. I think the performance is fine. I think he's, his fight with Dredd is entertaining. But he feels like he should either be like the primary villain in a film or like the main secondary villain, and they just like burn off the Angel Gang in this like one sequence, and it's like, oh, all right, that's too bad.
It makes it totally pointless,
and it doesn't jive with the rest of the film. This is the thing: is there are famous Judge Dredd comic stories, like there's one called like the Cursed Earth and stuff, where the whole story is about the judges out in this world having to fight these kind of gangs, and that's what a sequel could have been. And I think maybe you'd be more into it, even though you said it's a trope you're sick of. If you give it the time it needs, and the whole film is about Dredd fighting these cannibals out in a wasteland, that'd be better than just saying, it's just a 10-minute diversion from our main story.
That's a good point. Because it really did feel like I expected something like what you're talking about now, and as soon as they were dispatched in one room in 7 minutes, I was like, okay. Like, I just felt like totally cut that fucking scene out, and it's like, that's it. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's just not as memorable to me as I think it is for fans of the movie and or comics. I was just like, let's just get through this and get them back to Mega City 1. Yeah. I mean, some of the prosthetic work looks good though. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like it does look fun. Like, and I do like the idea of turning up the dial, but you're saying it doesn't have room to breathe whatsoever. That actually, it kind of takes you a second to realize what's going on because it's going so breakneck speed, and then it's over and we're done.
Well, they do get back to Mega City 1 though. Fergie and Dredd make their way back, and this is where we start to get into like the movie's like already kind of falling apart for me. Mm-hmm. But this is where I'm going to come back to what I said earlier when you said the thing about taking the helmet off, and I said it's kind of indicative of like larger problems with it and ultimately like story issues. Mm-hmm. Something starts happening at this point in the film where this is where I think as a Judge Dredd fan, more than the helmet thing, it's really where your heart starts to sink and you realize that this is a film that now is being made by at least some people involved not getting the character or not knowing what this film should be. Right. And that's, you realize this is a movie about Judge Dredd finding his heart. Yeah. Realizing he's wrong. Yeah. Realizing the system is messed up and kind of starting to become like a nicer guy, right? And it's like they do that with the Fergie character, you know, there's a whole thing where he's like, Fergie's asking him to apologize. He's like, I never apologized. And Fergie says like, you know, this is kind of telling him like this, you know, what happened to you proves the system's wrong. And you kind of see Dredd thinking about it. Mm-hmm. Now, to be fair, this is stuff that has happened in the comics, but we're talking about a comic series that, as I said, has been one continuity for over 40 years. And you've seen this stuff happen gradually. Yeah. To have your very first Judge Dredd movie kind of build to a climax where Dredd basically becomes a different character to a certain degree, right? We'll talk about the very ending when we get there, but I don't want this kind of character growth. The humor of Dredd and why the character works as a satirical character is because he's always so rigid. And the version of Dredd that I love and that should be in this film, even when you would like come to him and say, well, look, you got framed, so clearly the system doesn't work. He would still say like, no, the system works. Yeah. Right. This is just an aberration. Like that's the humor of Dredd. And I think like to try and have this character growth, and that's where I think Stallone's performance gets a little bad to me too, because I guess maybe that's unfair. It's just that it's the wrong kind of performance for this film. Because now he's playing it more comedic and playing it more like, oh, shucks. And you have the scene where they go to like Hershey's apartment and suddenly it doesn't feel like Judge Dredd at all anymore. It just feels like another Stallone character.
Yeah, I was just about to say he's just another action star. It's weird to say this, but he shouldn't have growth.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. Like the growth and emotions is like out of place for the character in this film.
Yeah, and it just doesn't work. Should we jump to the true finale action scene or lack thereof?
Well, you mentioned earlier that you said that there's great effects in this, and you said that that's not always the case. So maybe we should talk about that bike chase.
Oh yes, the bike chase. It's horrendous. It's really bad. I can't really overstate how bad it is. I actually did take a screen cap for our Instagram page, so go check that out. It perfectly encapsulates the scene.
It's because they're on these like flying motorcycles. Yeah, I have a couple issues with this scene. So first of all, you said it just doesn't look great. It's like clearly like green screen composite with miniatures and stuff, and it doesn't. It's the kind of thing where if it looked that bad, but this movie's like from '82, you'd be like, oh, that's kind of charming, right? Because it kind of has that look of like the speeders in Return of the Jedi. Yep. This is 1995. There's kind of no excuse for it to look as weak as it does.
And it sets up in the beginning how good everything does look. Like I'm telling you, the special effects are awesome in the beginning, and it does feel like they ran out of money or they couldn't figure it out, which is honestly something that could have happened because let me remind everybody, it was a young crew. They were all amateurs. It was brand new stuff. It was brand new people like working together. There was, I think, one main crew member that had a lot of experience, and actually you mentioned Batman 89, and that person was part of it. I don't know the name right now, but he was part of that production. But everybody else was just really green. So when it comes to a high concept CGI extreme bike chase around Mega City 1, like no wonder this is the scene that completely shit the bed. Mm-hmm. So
well, and let me tell you my bigger problem with this scene. And this is something I bet, I'm not even sure I picked up on it when I saw this when I was really young. Probably not. But this time watching it, it just kind of infuriated me. So we just said it's a chase, right? So it's him and Fergie on a bike. Who's chasing them, Chris? Who are the antagonists in this chase scene?
Man, who are they?
Other judges.
Yeah,
right?
oh yeah, right. Yeah.
They're other judges. What is Dredd's reaction to the judges that are chasing them? What does he try to do?
Remind me.
Murder them.
Yes.
Left and right.
You're so right.
He's just blasting judges away. He jumps onto one and actually does like his little Stallone one-liner, says, "This is where you get off," and like throws him off the bike. Shooting at others. And it's like, no, wait a minute. this is Judge Dredd. This guy, yes, he's been framed, but these judges are not the ones who framed him. He would not murder his fellow judges. And so that's the moment where right there, like, yep, this is now a film that has completely lost sight of this character and like what this character is and like what this movie, even like the thematics of the movie itself. There's no reason for him to suddenly be like, yeah, I have to kill all these people chasing me. Not when they are the law, which means so much to him. That's like what he lives for.
You're so right. I never even really registered with me that was going on. But yeah, that's a nosedive. That's terrible. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This is the scene that everybody should be fucking talking about, not the goddamn helmet scene. Like it's fucking this. He's straight up murdering the other police officers. Oh my god. Yep. All right.
It's also like a weird like logic moment where like there's this like kind of we see just as in every Blade Runner influenced movie, there's these like hologram signs all over the city. And like one of the judges on a bike like hits the hologram and it like blows up and kills him. I'm like, what kind of hologram is that you can like you don't just go through, right? Like, why is it made out of like a laser grid? Apparently, that seems dangerous in a city where we know there are flying vehicles.
Yeah, that's poor planning, poor business, poor building management for sure.
But you wanted to mention the action spectacular after this.
So yeah, the main chief bad guy now wants to create the clone program again, as we mentioned. And in his absence, not Tom Sizemore has put his DNA in to the clone machine. So now, what's gonna happen? He's cloning himself, and I was like, then I was actually back on board again. I was like, oh yes, I want Stallone, I want Dredd to fight all of these clones, and I am so ready to see all of these Ricos. I was very, very excited to see it all. And all of a sudden, there is a big battle scene. They're about to fight, and Rico is actually like, release the clones, it's the attack of the clones. And, he presses a button, and they got to release the clones before they're ready, Trev. Before they're ready. So I'm like, oh, shit. We're going to get like this gross, gooey, fucking violent, 60% done humanoid slime fest of gore. I'm just like, man, this is the movie for me. I'm jacked for it. Anyways, one of the clones wakes up and jumps up from his pod. That's it. That's it.
This is a sequence that I've read was heavily cut down. So we talk about like the NC-17 version. Apparently there was a whole like sequence where the other judges come in and just start blasting these clones away.
Yep.
And it was supposed to be like highly graphic and super bloody, and that's part of what we lost.
And I'm telling you, everybody listening, it just ends. It cuts
Not
away.
only does it just end, but even then, so then we get like, as I said, we get the customary cat fight, and then we get Dredd versus Rico. And Dredd versus Rico is about as lame of a final fight as you can get. Especially when you think about, coming off of something like, Demolition Man, where you have this like great final confrontation between Simon Phoenix and John Spartan, right? And just thinking like, compare that to this, where they just kind of brawl for a couple seconds. So we should say that this is happening on the Statue of Liberty, which I do like that idea. I like that the Statue of Liberty has been moved into Mega City 1.
Yep.
So the Statue of Liberty is like now surrounded by these giant block skyscrapers, and they're fighting on like the statue's head, and Dredd falls off. He's holding on by one hand, and Rico's about to like push him off, and he just fires a flare. It distracts Rico, and then he pulls Rico off.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah,
it's like I was like I almost had to rewind and be like, wait, was that it?
Yeah.
Was that really? There's like not even another additional beat there. It's like it's just so anticlimactic.
And looking back at the history, it is completely cut to shit.
Yeah.
It's just a big disappointment from an action level, from just like a finale level. And again, where did the clones go? We'll never know. We never return back. They're gone. It's so weird, man. It's like the weirdest obvious. I don't know. I mean, whatever. It doesn't matter. I'm done on my soapbox.
Well, and then let's just wrap it up by saying then the film limps to its terrible conclusion.
Oh,
with
horrible.
An atrocious final scene where Dredd comes out of the building, and now all the other judges are there, and you think they're going to arrest him because he's still basically a wanted man at this point. But we find out that they've discovered the truth of what happened. They know that he was framed. And on the spot, they just invite him because Griffin is dead now. They say, do you want to be the new Chief Justice? And he turns it down because he would rather remain a street judge. Now that's good. That's completely in line with Dredd. That's happened in the comics. It's true that he'll never be Chief Justice. That street judge is his role. But then we get the obviously studio mandated kiss with him and Hershey, which is
so
just
stupid.
Terrible. We get Dredd smiling, which that's worse than Dredd taking his helmet off. And I hate the fact that when Dredd drives away, then all the other judges start cheering him, and so do all the citizens of Mega City 1 who have formed a crowd, who, it has been established earlier in the film, hate and fear Dredd. And there is no reason for suddenly all of them, like they don't, first of all, they have no idea about what just happened. They don't have don't have the information that the judges have. And it's just like he drives away and suddenly all the citizens in the street are like, yeah, Dredd. It's such a stupid ending. It's just like so cringe and eye rolling.
It's bad.
I just couldn't,
Yeah, the movie's just a mess. Again, a super strong beginning, limps along in the middle, and then it just whiffs the end completely.
Yeah, and that's the problem. Is like when the end is bad, that's like what you're left with, right?
Totally.
I mean, the good news is it's only about 90 minutes.
Yep.
It's a very quick watch. It's very breezy. And as you said, if you want to sit down to watch it, I think the beginning is actually pretty entertaining, and you can kind of pull yourself along in terms of how great the production design is.
Yeah.
How cool Mega City 1 is. They do get a lot of those details right. I really do think that it really, to me, visually, this is very evocative of the comic. And I just think about like what a shame that is of like if you had got the tone right, because the Mega City 1 just looks perfect, and I like the costumes. They even do have like the little funny details from the comics where like when you hear the crossroads, like the crossroads in Mega City 1, they mention Abbott and Costello and Burns and Allen. So like the crossroads are all kind of named after famous comedic duos, and I like that kind of stuff. It's just so much. It's just such a shame that about halfway through it suddenly it just completely loses its identity.
Yeah.
It doesn't know what it wants to be anymore, and you can see those two conflicting takes on it, like fighting back and forth.
And you know what sucks is that, we said it's a huge failure, especially financially, so that's the reason we didn't get a sequel. But if it did well, this would have gotten a sequel. And critically, or maybe not, but let's just have a thought exercise here, is that it does do well, a sequel is commissioned, Stallone's back in, you'd think maybe he would learn a lesson, okay? Well, I have a quote for you.
I know. Yep.
From about 2008, he was promoting Rambo, I think, at the time. I can't remember what it was, but it was around when Rambo 2008 came out. And he has a quote here that he talks about, like it's a big it's a property I loved, and it sucks that we messed it up and the fans are mad about the helmet thing and yada yada. He says this though. It didn't live up to what it could have been. It probably should have been much more comic, really humorous, and fun. What I learned out of that experience was that we shouldn't have tried to make it Hamlet. It's more Hamlet and eggs. That's what's so asinine, Trev. No lessons learned. Nothing. Years later, financial disaster. It actually caused Stallone to make a bunch of garbage movies going forward for the next few years.
Yeah, that comeback we talked about ended 2 movies in, because this sent him on a bad path.
Yeah, it fucking. Hey guys, do you remember Driven? Anyways, so he made garbage, and he still has the mentality to be like, oh yeah, it should have been more silly. Makes no sense.
Yeah, it's crazy too, because if you look at like that full quote, he almost seems like he's gonna get it right earlier on, because he says, he says, I loved that property when I read it because it took a genre that I love, what you could term the action morality film, and made it a bit more sophisticated. It had political overtones. It showed how if we don't curb the way we run our judicial system, the police may end up running our lives. It dealt with archaic governments. It dealt with cloning and all kinds of things that could happen in the future. Yeah, exactly, Sly. That's what we're talking about. That's why people love the comic. And then suddenly for him to go like, yeah, I probably should have had more gags and slapstick humor. It's like, no, you're missing it again. You were so right in the first time. The satire of the world is all you need.
One of the most bizarre quotes I've seen that he turns into a different person by the end of it. It was just, it was very, very strange. I do want to leave with one quote regarding, you're probably wondering, where's Danny Cannon in all this? We mentioned Stallone being part of the sequel if there was ever one commissioned. Well, the question was posed to Mr. Cannon. Will there be a sequel? This is his quote. I'd rather stick needles in my eyes. And that's Judge Dredd.
Yeah. Well, let's give the final word to John Wagner. I think that's only appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Only fair.
Yeah. 100%.
So John Wagner, who, as I said, is the creator of the character. He's been, the caretaker of this character for, over 4 decades now. He's asked in Empire in 2012 on his thoughts on the film, and he's always, this certainly wasn't the first time he talked about it.
Sure,
he was, he's pretty down on the film from the initial release, and he just sums it up. He says the story had nothing to do with Judge Dredd, and Judge Dredd wasn't really Judge Dredd. It says Wagner said that it was a pity the way the film turned out, since the production values were great and they had the budget for it. In an interview for Total Film magazine, he said the film had the wrong story and it tried to do too much. And you can't really sum it up better than that.
Yeah.
It is telling the wrong story. Like I said, it's telling the story of the first Judge Dredd film it's made should not be a story about Dredd, finding his humanity. Like that's not what we want to see. And yeah, as he said, it looks great. Everything on screen, like it looks like the world of Dredd. Like I said, it's not even that they got the wrong lead actor in terms of just performance. They got the wrong lead actor in terms of letting him have creative control.
Yeah.
And that's the issue. And yeah, as you said, it bombs bad. I mean, this is a film that was pretty hyped, a big Sylvester Stallone action film. It finishes 5th this opening weekend.
Yeah.
It comes in behind Apollo 13, Pocahontas, Batman Forever, and another film opening that week, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie.
Yes.
Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie beats Judge Dredd.
I know.
Yeah.
Hold on. What's his name? Ooze. What's his name? Is his name Ooze? Mr. Ooze? Dr. Ooze? Fuck.
Oh, Ivan Ooze.
Hold on. I don't know. And in the words of Ivan Ooze, teenagers.
And I'm going to be honest. I get it because I like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie more than this.
Fuck yeah. That movie's great.
Yep.
Yeah, that movie's fun.
Yeah. So no, yeah, it is like I said, it's a financial disaster. The fan base doesn't like it. It's not good enough to like make people who don't know the character interested. It just falls on its face.
Yeah.
And what could have been? I mean, obviously, all the, like you said, the pieces are in place for this to be a franchise. There's certainly, as much as they stuck in, there's still other iconic stuff in the comics that they don't get to. I know there was talk about the sequel perhaps getting to the Dark Judges, including Judge Death, who I think a lot of people think of as the primary Judge Dredd villain. So these are actually a band of judges that come from an alternate reality where they were such an extreme version of the judges that they eventually decided that the ultimate crime is simply life. And being alive was a crime, and they basically murdered everybody in their universe and then cross over into this universe and become kind of recurring antagonists for Dredd. And Judge Death is the most famous one. He's kind of he's like the zombie judge. Looks like the cover of like a heavy metal album. He's pretty awesome. He's like this emaciated corpse wearing a judge costume. He's great. I would have really, I don't know. Saying I don't know that I would have trusted these filmmakers to get that right, but that's probably where they were trying to head.
Right.
But yeah, it just doesn't get there. And as you said, the fallout is Stallone falls into a series of, progressively underperforming films. So it's maybe if this film had done better, his career would have gone a little bit better. No, he gets another comeback later. As we said, his career goes in peaks and valleys, but he definitely, the rest of the 90s is a bad time for him.
Yeah.
And even the early 2000s. Yeah.
I would say until really Rambo and the Expendables is when it kind of starts to come back up again.
Yeah. So 15 years. It takes 15 years for him to kind of get back. Yeah. But 17 years later, we do get a slightly happier end of the story. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, our next episode, we are talking about the 2012 film Dredd. So
that's right. This is not the end of the cinematic story of Judge Dredd.
No, they another crack at it. Yeah, and we'll be getting into depth about that one.
How did that one turn out? Well, we're covering it on Failure to Franchise, so you put the pieces together. But still.
that is kind of funny. I kind of it's funny because like there's movies. Oh, never mind.
No.
Our concept of our show is so depressing sometimes. like it's funny. Like I make sure to log my movies that we review here on my Letterboxd account. So it's just so funny that every single one of them has like a low rating or something, or they failed miserably. People were fired. People were like ran out of Hollywood, and we're like, go watch them and hang out with us later, and we'll talk about them. Well, it's just so depressing. I love it.
I will say this though, without giving away too much. Sure. There will certainly be depressing elements of what we talk about next time.
Yeah.
But in general, when we visit Dredd, it's not going to be quite the downer that this episode was.
No.
And yeah, it is a completely different kind of take on the material. So yeah, it's and I think that's always fascinating to talk about, you know, various interpretations of one singular character. So yeah, that's our next episode, Dredd. So the month of Dredd continues. November is Dredd month here at Failure to Franchise.
Yeah, it's also Dredd month in the United States of America right now too.
You're telling me, buddy. You're just watching it. I'm living it. I am living the potential creation of Mega City 1 and this world.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Yep.
And with that level of optimism, follow us on Twitter at F2FPod. That's F2, the number 2, FPod on Twitter. We're on Instagram, Facebook, all the socials, Letterboxd. You know what? Check your podcast app. We have all the links there. So follow us along. Subscribe, please. Rate, review, whatever you do. Well, another rhyme. Like us there, like us everywhere. Rate. What is it? What did you say?
It's like us there, like us everywhere.
No. What did I just rhyme? Whatever you do. Rate, review, whatever you do.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. Rate, review, whatever you do. Like us there, like us everywhere. Anyways.
You know what, Chris? I knew you'd say that.
Go on.
We didn't even talk about that. I know we're wrapping up, but we never even talked about the fact that his catchphrase is "I knew you'd say that." How lame of a catchphrase is that for a character?
Oh yeah, that's terrible.
I should have taken a shot every time he said it. I didn't even think about it.
Next time.
Yeah. I don't know if there'll need to be a next time, but maybe. Who knows? Yeah. All right. Anyway, well, we'll be back for Dredd.
Yep. Thanks. Bye.
Yep.
Rate, review, whatever you do. Oh my god, that's so funny. I gotta keep that in.
I hope that now, like on the next episode, you add something else to that, and I hope your like end thing just keeps getting longer and longer every time.
Holy shit, that is fucking hilarious.